In 1942, the Dutch East Indies collapsed in 9 days. An empire built over 3 centuries disappeared in little more than a week. Tens of thousands of men surrendered. KNIL soldiers, Dutch officers, colonial administrators who had spent their lives inside a system that suddenly no longer existed. Within months, they were in the jungle, not fighting, working. The Burma Railway needed bodies. It didn't ask where they came from. Most know this story through a British lens. Australian prisoners. British officers surviving impossible odds. What they don't know is this. The largest European group on the railway wasn't British. It was Dutch. Men from the KNIL prisoners, taken after the collapse of a colony they had believed was permanent. The railway did not care about the distinction. It needed jungle cut open, track laid down, bodies that could survive long enough to finish the work. Most didn't. The journey to Burma was its own kind of collapse. Transport ships packed beyond capacity, no medical supplies, barely enough food. Some voyages took weeks. Some ended with bodies already waiting to be unloaded. Then came the jungle. Not a prison camp, a construction site. Dense canopy that blocked the sky. Monsoon rains that turned the ground to mud for months. Disease moving through the camps faster than the railway moved through the hills. Cholera, dysentery, tropical ulcers that consumed flesh down to the bone. It became known as the Speedo Period. Finished the railway faster, longer hours, less food, no rest. Men worked until they collapsed, then were ordered to continue anyway. Thousands of Dutch and KNIL prisoners never left the jungle alive. Not because they were weaker, because many had already watched their entire world disappear in 9 days. The empire had told them they were permanent. The jungle disagreed. What kept men alive was not hope. Hope required a future to attach itself to. The future had stopped being legible somewhere between the surrender and the jungle. What kept men alive was narrower than that. A routine, a small task completed. A decision made silently and daily, to function rather than feel. Many KNIL soldiers were Indo-European, men of mixed Dutch and Indonesian heritage shaped by the colonial system, discarded when it fell. They knew the climate. They knew how to read jungle conditions. That knowledge passed between men, quietly, without ceremony. Which wounds needed immediate attention, which guards operated on routine, and which operated on mood. It was not resistance in any formal sense. It was survival as a practiced discipline. Doctors worked without instruments, without drugs, recording deaths in notebooks hidden inside their clothing. The railway was being built on top of them. They built something underneath it. The railway was completed in October 1943, 415 kilometers, built on a timetable that never accounted for what human bodies could survive. Tens of thousands of Asian laborers died building it. Ramusha workers, conscripts, mostly unnamed. Alongside them, thousands of Allied prisoners. For the survivors, the war did not end there. More camps, more labor, more disease. And when Japan surrendered in August 1945, many Dutch prisoners discovered there was nothing clear left to return to. The Dutch East Indies was gone. Not damaged, not occupied. Gone. Indonesian nationalists declared independence 2 days after Japan's surrender. While prisoners were still in camps, the colonial world they had served had already stopped existing. Some men returned to the Netherlands, a country many barely knew. Some tried to return to Indonesia and found another war waiting. The railway had taken years of their lives. The empire took the rest. What remained was not a story anyone rushed to tell. The British had their narrative. The Australians had theirs. Memorials, films, accounts that gave the suffering shape. The Dutch prisoners came home to a country still processing its own occupation, to a public with no framework for what the East Indies had been, let alone what its collapse had cost the men who served inside it. The railway became a footnote inside a footnote. The railway is still there, overgrown, reclaimed by jungle. The men who built it are gone. What they left behind is not a monument. It is evidence that the colonial world of the Dutch East Indies, the permanence, the hierarchy, the assumption that the system would hold, had already broken before anyone was ready to admit it. The railway didn't end an empire. It just made the ending visible. The men who survived did not return unchanged. Some carried the jungle home with them, into another war, into another collapse, into lives that never fully reconnected with the world they had left behind. Because for many Dutch and KNIL soldiers, the hardest part was not surviving the camps. It was surviving what came after. The Dutch East Indies, it was gone. The empire, ending. The men who came back, that's the next story.